Hello, BookTube. Well, my internet's back on. A little while ago, I've uploaded a video I made earlier in the week, and I thought I'd do a Friday Reads of sort. We'll see how it goes. I got quite a bit I wanted to speak about because even though I haven't really, well, I've had lots of time on my hands for this past week from about Tuesday onward, but I haven't been settled enough to be able to read any length of time. So the magazines have been just really good for that because I've been fretting about the internet because of work, checking every half hour or so to make sure it's not it's working or not working, and trying to get things sorted. So it's been a boon to have the magazines for reading. But book wise, I've continued to read M.R. James. I'm doing one story a day. I still got today's story to do, so I'm still enjoying those. I finally finished reading the Tales of the Troubled Dead, Ghost Stories and Culture History by Catherine Belsey. And it wasn't because I had problems with it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it's densely packed with a lot of references. When I first read the sources in the back, I thought, oh, this should be just referring to a bunch of little short stories that are in the Oxford or a few other anthologies that I have, but it's way more than that. And it deserves a second reading with a more detailed reading and dipping and getting into those sources, or a lot of the sources, which will be very interesting. But there's a couple interesting things that sort of popped up while I was reading this, because I was just reading a chapter a day as well just to finish it up, and there's I'll read you it here because I'll say you'll realize what I mean by it's opportune here. Opportune time. The ultimate instance of spectral impotence has to be the movie Ghosts Can't Do It, directed by John Derek in 1989. This deservedly obscure work offers, in addition, a cameo appearance by Donald J. Trump. The main protagonist is an extremely volatile specter who repeatedly appears on screen with flames flickering round his image to give instructions to his young widow on how to arrange her future. As a ghost, he can't make love to his grieving wife, but it turns out that a young Italian fisherman who is vigorously alive would very much like to do so. And then in quotation marks, she goes, Trump playing himself hints that he too is available, but no one takes up his offer. The person has to die, so, well, missed opportunities, I say. Um, yeah, and then the last, like, she just goes through, sort of sums things up about how uh, the stories of ghosts changed throughout time. Like the Norse ones, they were actually physical beings. To get rid of them, you had to chop them up or kill them or banish them from the area. And then sort of the classicals, what I think of anyways, classical ghost story sort of was developed through the 19th century for fiction wise, and with M.R. James saying that it's always has to be happening in the past. Something like, oh, I was told this story when I was a lad 50 years ago, and that kind of thing. So there's a passage of time. It's cliched now, but it works. I love that style, and then it's changed throughout times a little bit. And she goes into it's one of my favorite films. Like there's a few ghost films that I really like, and one of them is The Innocents, based on The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, and she goes quite a bit detail into it, talking about how it could be it's written. Henry James writes the novelette from two sources, whether there is ghosts or it's all in the governess's head, and it's wonderful. It's a wonderful book. So if anybody's interested in anything of this sort, it's something that I would recommend. But just if you're interested, take a look at it. I'm sure you can probably find little bits and pieces, maybe an essay of it, because it's academic, so it's published by Edinburgh University Press. So there might be some essays or an abstract online somewhere. Um, 2019 Edinburgh University Press. Now, getting to the periodicals, the journals. This was my first issue of the Guardian Weekly, with its sort of promo cover. Promo cover with little bits on it. I'm quite disappointed with this. However, there was a very good article in here. It's called "The Last of the Band." In the 1930s, men and women from around the world enlisted in the international brigades to fight fascism in Spain and beyond. But as the final few survivors are celebrated, the brigade's complex legacy is once more under attack. It's by Giles Tremlett, who's actually written a book called "The International Brigades: Fascism, Freedom, and the Spanish Civil War." It's out now. It's 600 or 600, 700 pages, I think. It is on my list, and it's just it's a really good article. And the reason why I'm interested in this is it's George Orwell, because he was in one of the international brigades. There were many of them, mostly communist based, and therein lies the problems for the people who survived and came back. Like the MI5 watched him and others, and it's sort of really a tangled mess of where the allegiances lied and everything. And even when others went back through rest of Europe, like in France, they were looked at very closely. But when the Second World War started, a lot of them, like in France, they started up as freedom fighters, starting resistance groups and other places throughout Europe as well. In Eastern Europe, or what became Eastern Europe, interesting. He talks about these people who went to Spain to fight, like freedom fighters, as they called themselves. Then wound up being, once the Russia, Soviet Union, took over, and for Berlin Wall, everything, the Eastern Russia, or Eastern Europe. Many of them became sort of the overlords in some ways of the areas, whatever countries they were in, and they were just in charge. And they just, even though they were saying they were fighting fascism, oppression in Spain, they became the oppressors, which is quite ironic and interesting. But he does mention Orwell in here. I don't know how much Orwell features in the book at all, but he also mentions 21-year-old classics graduate from Cambridge, Bernard Knox, and he's quite. I'm sure some of you know him. He edited a classics. Memories failing. But sort of an anthology classical and a bunch of other stuff. He did something on Thebes, I believe. It's quite well known, and there's other ones that he mentions here. But as I say, I'm interested in it sort of tangentially. I can't even speak now. With Orwell, even though I know very little about the Spanish Civil War, so I will probably get this book eventually. But I also need a really good history of the Spanish Civil War. So now moving on to last week's Times Literary Supplement. The highlight for me in this was a rather longish review by Jane Darcy. She is a visiting research fellow in the Department of Comparative Literature at King's College London. And she reviewed Thomas de Quincey's Selected Writings by Robert Morrison, editor. 672 pages, Oxford University Press, but ouch, £95 and US $135. But it sounds fascinating. When I first saw it, and I go, oh yeah, well, but it looks like the notes that she talks about that Morrison uses is fantastic. but a little too pricey for me now. Hopefully it'll go down. But there's some interesting little quotes in here that I liked. Yeah, it's well, basically it's a book of. I think it has the complete text of the opium confessions of an English opium eater, as well as a lot of other essays. And she goes on and talks about the autobiographical aspect of the opium eater, as well as other essays that De Quincey had done. Um, but he changed the aspects of the reality, like his sister's death. He changes her age from 2 years younger rather than the reality of 2 years older. And people who knew De Quincey a lot never knew a lot of this stuff. He never mentioned it. But getting back to the quotes here is from this. She says, it says, it took him until his mid-30s to find a direction in life. His addictive book buying always outstripped his modest private income. Well, yeah, we know what that's like. Um, a lifetime's laudanum consumption, meanwhile, at a time when happiness might be bought for a penny, quotes, probably damaged his productivity more than his purse. Um, yeah, I just always found it, just as a bit of an aside, that they call it a private income, and it's like an inheritance. And um, I find that I always found that strange, because to me an income means something that you've actually worked for, and I don't think that's what they're referring to here. I think they're referring to an inheritance, but maybe not. But I have heard that with regards to inheritance, they get a stipend from the interest or whatever from the business, but they do nothing, next to nothing with. Another thing is here that De Quincey, she says, had a pathological hatred of the Orient, China in particular, and his horror of a mysterious, quote, infection emanating from the East. I thoroughly loved it. It's 2 pages, like it's that, and then here, but she goes a bit off the rails at the end. For me, in a way, she says, how to, it's to the question of how we can approach De Quincey's autobiographical writing. So much what he published was autobiographical in one way or another. We could take another approach. Perhaps the question of whether or not De Quincey is telling the truth is unhelpful. We could instead adopt the term autobiographic fiction. Oh, and then she goes on. Well, that's enough of that. Yeah, the that was the highlight in here for me. Um, Let me see. There was a few other things. There was, yeah, primates progress is how humans do and don't stand out in an evolutionary crowd. Kind of torn apart a little bit by the reviewer Barbara J. King, who's a biological anthropologist whose seventh book, Animals' Best Friends, is due in March. But it was interesting, even so. Not sure if it'd be a book I'd buy, but I found that interesting. Um, and then this one here, Magic in the Catacombs. Keith Miller writing a Mordu, Alex Felby. Just yeah, about the catacombs. I think it's both. Actually, no, sorry, I didn't read this one yet, so I haven't read that article. So I'm looking at it and going, what's this about? Oh, it's a fiction thing. That's probably why I passed it up. But yeah, there wasn't. There's a few other things that I read, but nothing else sort of jumped out in the Times Literary Supplement this week, which is a little bit of a change. The MC column was pretty good. The first section of it talked about book collecting, and yeah, it's just it's saying that if it's a real howling bargain, you must have, though you may be better off pursuing a book with a guided price. So it's just like, you're not really gonna get a bargain in used books. Then going into what do we for time? Yeah, that's not too bad. Going into the Spectator, And yeah, this is sort of the more right, I guess, conservative um, paper of the two that I have here, the Spectator and the New Statesman, which is what the New Statesman was originally started out as a leftist paper, sort of a la the Fabian Society, but it's more center at the moment, or maybe a little left center. But the Spectator is definitely right, and it's as usual. It's well, this is a lot of stuff about COVID, the usual thing, and then it's got interesting articles, opinion pieces like by Rod Little that always infuriate me and make me angry to read them. But it's sort of good to read them to know what's happening there. My favorite sort of part of all this is which is starting to grow on me. I didn't think too much of it when I first got this, but it's the books and art section that I like the best. Like here is it's a review of a book about the biscuit, a history of the very British indulgent, a history of the biscuit. It's just by Lizzie Collingham. The Bodley Head is £18.99, 320 pages on the biscuit. It's just fabulous. It's and the reviewer is Prue Leith. Prue Leith. Oh wait a minute, yeah, Prue Leith is the reviewer. Yeah, and there's other ones here. The Tissue of Lies, Claire Loudon. The Many Lives of Aunt Monica, but it's more or less about. It's a bit like I said. It's a bit like a William Boyd novel, but it's okay. Reading most of the stuff, like they're a bit shorter, so I've read a number of these, and some of them I don't even quite remember, but I found interesting. Yeah. Think about William S. Burroughs' Dead Fingers Talk, The Restored Text, edited by Oliver Harris. And here's, Cathedrals of Steam, How London's Great Stations Were Built and How They Transformed the City. And that's quite good. And I enjoy stuff like that. And that would be something. If I had limited space and limited money, I'd be buying all these ones that I find interesting in here immediately, but that's not the case. And the arts, and there's always an interesting art, and they were all members of the Stasi now, and it's about it's sort of about mostly about the offended. It's an Irving Welsh documentary. So that was quite good. Yeah, and there's little bits on television, like Splitting Image, exhibitions, and so forth. I like that. And then there was one little bit on Notes on Bog Bodies, about how there's still so much unknown, and most are not as well preserved as this chappie here. Most of them have their bones sort of dissolved, but the skin and the flesh is all intact, but they're sort of warped out of shape. And yeah, so that was just a fun little read. Let me see what else there's stuff about high life. That's it for that. There's a life section that sometimes is worth perusing. Yeah, it's gonna fall down if I go. So we'll do that. And then the New Statesman. Again, it's very COVID and Trump orientated, but again, I skipped most of those articles because I knew what it's going to do. And again, there's opinion pieces by some authors, and some of them infuriate me, and scratch my head at others. Again, I've re-looked at this one, and the critics section is quite interesting. There's quite a few things in here. It's arts, books, music, film, television, and radio. It's the last third, I'd say, of it, like a quarter of it. It's book reviews, and some are good and some are not so. They're a little longer than in The Spectator, the book reviews. Let me see here to highlight one that's I found interesting. Here, this is kind of interesting. It's The Woman Beyond the Garden. I mentioned this on Saturday. Frances Hodgson Burnett's Secret Garden has enchanted readers for more than a century, but few pay attention to the remarkable life of its author. And the article is written by Anne Thwaite, who I only know her from an Edmund Goss biography. I might have misnamed who that was on Saturday. I can't remember, but it's Edmund Goss, and she wrote this biography. Came out in, I think, the 90s. She said it's sort of it's a reprint of it by Bloomsbury, I think, or Duckworth. Sorry, no, Duckworth. It's a reprint of it. And she goes through and talks about her sort of fascination with Frances Hodgson Burnett, and The Secret Garden in particular. And she mentions the film adaptations, and she loved the Margaret O'Brien and Elsa Lanchester one from the 1949 MGM film. I remember seeing that. I liked the BBC TV one, and also the despite who directed it, Francis Ford Coppola's, but it's Maggie Smith is in it. And it's basically her sort of fascination with the author and the stories, and then wanting to write the biography and a few ups and downs, sort of writing it. So it's quite. It was really enjoyable, an insight sort of into sort of writing a biography, and her personal experiences. It'd be nice if something like this would be like the introduction to the volume, but I doubt it is. And that's the interesting thing. All these little articles in these magazines are just fantastic. But they never ever see the light of day after this, generally speaking. And then there's the critics. There's the Great Outdoors. It's another article on of an artist, a little portrait of an artist. This time, Max Parrish. And there's one of his, and then it's just like it's one little page, but by Michael Prodiger. Really enjoyable. And then there's a film of Borat's new film, and again a review of Splitting Image, and yeah, just some stuff about radio. And then the back pages are kind of interesting sometimes. There's little opinion pieces, things about what's happening, little cultural little bits and pieces, and then they even have a little bit if somebody's interested in chess and so forth. Yeah, it's I'm really enjoying this, and as I say, the for some reason it's sad that they don't these articles don't see the light of day, like this in the Spectator. There's all sorts of stuff, and I know that there are occasionally books that are sort of a culling from these, but there's so many and so many like that. I think that article of De Quincey in Time, the literary supplement, is great, and there's this one here. Like this was the latest, the London Review of Books. Nice cover there. It's a bi-weekly one. It's every 2 weeks, and this one is Volume 42, number 21, 5th of November. And I keep saying that I don't like it as much as the Times Literary Supplement. And every time I sit down and reevaluate that fact, I find an issue like this that has so much good stuff in. So I'm a bit perplexed, I suppose. And there's a few things, like I didn't really actually pick this one up and look close to it till today. So there's still things that I want to read. Like there's a review here of, it's called Eat Butterflies with me, Patricia Lockwood. Think, Write, Speak, Uncollected Essays, Reviews, Interviews, and Letters to the Editor by Vladimir Nabokov. Now that looks fantastic. I think I actually had that pre-ordered just when I saw it, but I didn't go through with it. I didn't buy it. But the ones that I've read, there's that one that's interesting. And then there's one here about an artist. I did mention this last week. I haven't got around to reading that one yet. But there was a few that... oh, no, here's another one. Like here, They Saw Him Coming, Neil Acheson. The Lockhart plot, Love, Betrayal, Assassination, and Counter-Revolution in Lenin's Russia by Jonathan Schiller, Oxford. That looks like could be interesting, at least to read the review. And it looks like there's an article about book reviewing itself. I'm not sure what this is. It's just a little box that's outside, so I haven't read that one yet. But the ones that I did read earlier this evening was... here's another one that's to be interesting. It's The Importance of Being Ernie. Ferdinand Mount reviewing Ernest Bevin, Labour's Churchill by Andrew Adonis. That could be interesting. At least to read the review. Now I'm getting, because I usually read these from the back to the front. Yeah, so that's why I'm getting further back in here. I try to find here. Oh, here's another one that it looks at her, 1,000 Slain. Barbara Newman reviewing Arts of Dying, Literature, and Finitude in Medieval England by D. Vance Smith, Chicago University Press. Yeah, this was really... And here's an article that's I would love to see in a collection of things. It's by Ian Patterson, who is a lecturer, I believe, at one of the universities here in the UK. And it's The Body in the Library is Never Our Own. And it's his writing about Niall Marsh, or Nagayo, but I think it's Niall. I'm not sure. Inspector Allen, I watched the TV shows. I forget when they were on. I guess maybe late 80s, early 90s. I really enjoyed them. I don't think I've ever read any of her books, and he even mentions that he had thought he was asked to write an article. He spent a year reading hundreds of crime stories that he enjoyed, and he was asked to write this article, and then he realized he hadn't read any of her books, which she wrote 30-some novels. And it's just a fabulous article. It's quite long. It goes for one, not full pages, but... like 6, about 10 or 11 columns, I would say. So it's really good. And again, it would be so nice if that's the thing, they just never see the light of day. And David Thompson, who I think it's the last one I'm going to look at here. I believe, yes. I think it is. David Thompson is a film historian. He's written a lot of books, but his sort of biggest one is a film dictionary, or film encyclopedia dictionary, I think it is. Film, it's fraught with problems, because to do a proper film dictionary, you need something like this bloody thing in the back here, 60 volumes to do it justice. And this is a 1 volume with just like a little paragraph. So it falls down for me for that. I've had it in the past, but it's just a quick reference. But I've always liked. He did a David O. Selznick, I believe. Yeah, it was David O. Selznick biography that is top notch. And he's reviewing here two Cary Grant biographies. One that's out in November this month, and the other in I think October. Well, no, I think it says October, but I think it's out later actually, next year. But anyway, it's Cary Grant, The Making of a Hollywood Legend by Mark Clancy, who I'd never heard of before. I had to actually look him up. He's quite young, but he's a film historian at University of London, I think it was, but one of the universities again. And he's been on sort of consulted on a number of documentaries. And also Cary Grant, a brilliant disguise by Scott Eyman, who Scott Eyman has many books, biographies, Print the Legend, John Ford. He's done a John Wayne. He's done Mary Pickford, and one I think The Speed of Sound, which is fabulous. I really really enjoy. I don't think I have that anymore. I used to have that in Canada, but I've read a number of his books, and he is quite good. But yeah, he goes through the two. Well, he gives Thompson gives a brief description of Cary Grant's or Archibald Leach, his real name, who was born in Bristol here in the UK, and he was born in 1904 on 18th of January in a terraced house in Bristol. It says his father, Elias, was a clothes presser by trade. His mother, Elise, had nothing to do but look after her men, and his father was unfaithful, or says was less than faithful, and put his wife, Archibald's mother, in an insane asylum, and basically told, according to the story, told Archibald, who became Cary Grant, that she had died, and he didn't know about this until many, many years later. He left home when he was young. He got into a vaudeville type group, the music halls here, and he did a lot of aerobics and things like that, and he flipped off of stage and do a whole bunch of stuff. And then he went with one troupe to New York, and that's where he stayed basically. And he started getting at the theater vaudeville there, and he um, he was in a play with Fay Ray. What does it say here? It says called Nick, a musical called Nicky. It said it flopped, but the character he played was Carrie, and they used a phone book because she thought he should change his name. So Cary Grant was born in 1931. And he went on to, as most people know, went on to do a number of films, uh, and I think he later found out that his mother was in an institution, and he sort of had a nervous breakdown a little bit because sort of the story is that he didn't know, but there's hints that he might have known. But anyway, and he was married at that time, 1931 or 33, to Virginia Cheryl, who was an actress, socialite actress that was in Chaplin's. She played the blind girl in Chaplin's. Modern is it Modern Times? No, City Lights. City Lights. Sorry, yeah, City Lights. Um, yeah, and then but he got her out, his mother out of the insane asylum. She was 57. He doted on her. He supported her for the rest of her life. She did live. She died at 95 in 1973. And there's been the question of and gossip of Cary Grant's sexuality, and he's like whether he was actively gay or not. But it sort of says there's a good sort of little quote he uses here. I should have found it, but it was sort of like that he was always charming and so forth, and uh, occasionally gay, I suppose, or something like that. But yeah, it just goes through and it talks about all his many marriages. Uh, and something that I didn't know that well, he died. Well, I knew he died in 1986, well, it says Davenport, Iowa. But he he was touring around, doing a sort of stage play where he would show clips from his films, do some anecdotes and things like that, which was kind of interesting. But there's a good couple good quotes here. And it says, there's an anecdote, any biographies of famous people are gathering pieces, there are such gems, but it's, it's, with Rosalind Russell, who co-starred with him in my brain is gone. It's a fabulous film. Um, it's, um, oh, why does my brain do this? His Girl Friday. And he co-starred at the fabulous film, and even David Thompson says it's like, wasn't even nominated, and that was for an Academy Award, and that's basically grounds to disband the Academy. But he's talking to the anecdote is he's talking to Rosalind Russell in her dressing room, and she says she's going to go to London, and then he says, "Why don't you use my Rolls?" Grant said. He had two Rolls Royces, one for Beverly Hills and one for London. She was touched and said she would love to, but then Grant added, "When you arrive in London, call MCA, my agents. They will give you the rental fee and the cost of the chauffeur." And like Grant Thompson is saying, well, was it? Yeah, it's hard to say, but it might show on his character that he was very penny pinching, or it's just sort of he was sort of reenacting sort of the character from His Girl Friday. Um, yeah, and it's he spent yeah, here's that quote. He says here. So he didn't bump into furniture, or it says, let's back up here. Uh, he endured a parade of civilians who were in awe at being with him. So he didn't bump into furniture and fart in public, and only went a little gay sometimes. He liked ball games. He was fond of the Fabergé private plane. He was on the board of their now defunct fragrance operation. But yeah, and that is sort of, I think, that's the last thing. That was quite long, actually. Um, but that was really enjoyable, and they're both books that I wouldn't mind getting at some point. But I'm almost at 40 minutes, BookTube, so I will end it there. Hopefully, this will upload. This is my Friday reads. I intend to continue reading the magazines. There are magazines that came in this week and a little bit of last week, so I'm a week behind always. But tomorrow I'll be back with sort of what's come in this week, and there's a lot that has come in. But my new ghosty sort of book is The Ghost Story 1840-1920 Culture History by Andrew Smith, that I'll be starting very shortly. It's short, so short and sweet, so that's good. Continuing with my M.R. James. I got to get to Ray Bradbury, Something Wicked This Way Comes as well. But I will leave you there, BookTube, at 39 minutes and a bit. Take care.